Hello, my name's Tim Shoebridge. In this video I'm going to show you how you can play chords on this tiny little synthesizer here from Korg, the NTS-1. Okay, so here's the NTS-1. I've got it already set up with my user oscillator, which I've installed using the librarian software via this USB cable. This USB cable is also acting as a power source for the synth, and it's also connected up to my PC to allow me to send and receive MIDI, because I just don't like this ribbon controller here. So I'm going to be using the workstation keyboard that it's sort of resting on at the moment, which is my Korg Kronos. So it's already hooked up via MIDI, so I can play it, as you can see there. So even though you don't see me fiddling around with this keyboard, I'm going to be playing it on the Kronos. Right, so the first thing that we need to do is to select the user oscillator. So with these buttons down the bottom here, make sure the oscillator is selected, and then use this type encoder to scroll through your installed user oscillators. And there at the end is my Chord user oscillator. It's unfortunate it's only a 4-character display, so you'll see it scrolling through there now. So by default, if I hold down an A, this is what we get. Okay, so it's playing a chord. It's actually got 4 waveform generators inside this user oscillator, and they're all pitched differently. So which chord it plays is dependent on these 2 potentiometers here, A and B. A is the shape control, and B is called Alt on the NTS-1, but it's the equivalent of Shift plus Shape on a Minilog XD or a Prolog. Now there are 4 chords that you can choose, and it's depending on the position of this shape control. So there is a tiny little notch on these so you can see where they're positioned. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it's at 12 o'clock at the moment. So before 12 o'clock it'll play a major chord. So I'm going to hold down the A. It plays a major chord. After 12 o'clock it plays a minor chord. And you've got pretty much all of the way around to select minor or major, except for the very extremes. So at the very minimum value, it's going to play a major 7th, and then at maximum value, it's going to play a minor 7th. So just to summarize then, starting at minimum, this is a major 7th, major, minor, minor 7th. Now there are some other sets of 4 chords that you can play, and those are selectable via this Alt control, the Shift plus Shape control. And I'll just scroll up on the screen what those different combinations are. But by default, when this is set round at 0, we get major 7, major, minor, and minor 7. Now if I hold down a note and move this control, you'll see that nothing changes. And this is what I've sort of done by design. And the idea is that if you want to play the synth live and select chords live, then my idea is that you'll want to set it to say major, because we're going to play G major. And then while you're playing G major, you want to quickly cue up the next position, which is going to be minor, so that I can play E minor. And then I'm going to move it back to major, because I want to play C major. And then back for E minor, and then back for G. So what this allows you to do is to sort of cue up the position of the shape control before you press a key and play the chord, which is good for live use. You can change that behavior with a user parameter so that in real time it plays what you've selected, and that's best when you want to drive it through MIDI, and I will show you that in a little while. So that's how you can change the chords that you're playing when you hold down a single note. And just so that in case you didn't believe me, I'm just going to use this keyboard quickly with this top key here. So this is major 7, major, minor, oops, and minor 7th. Right, so to access the user oscillator parameters, we have to hold down this oscillator button. And when we hold it down, you'll see the display changes to LFO. And when it says LFO, we can use the A and B controls to set up an LFO to modulate either the pitch of the oscillator or the shape. Now, we don't want to do that now. We'll come back to that another time. To get to our parameters, we have to use this type encoder. Just turn it around one little click. And now we are in user parameter edit mode. And I can let go of this button now, and it's flashing to show that I'm in user parameter edit mode. So I've got just 3 parameters set up for the user oscillator. The first one is called wave, then we've got slop, and then we've got something called mode. So wave allows you to change the waveform. So far we've been hearing a sawtooth, but there are actually 4 values to choose from. Number 1 is a sine wave, 2 is a triangle, 3 is a sawtooth, and then 4 is a square wave. Now, just as you'll see me, I'm changing B. B is changing the value of the parameter, type is selecting the parameter, and A is always shape. So let me just change it to a major chord, and let's go through those again. So 1 sine, 2 triangle, 3 saw, and 4 square. So that's wave. The next parameter is called slop, and it ranges from 0 through to 100%. So you've got 4 waveforms playing each time I hold down a single key to give us the chord. And what slop does is allow us to semi-randomly detune those 4 different notes. So if I hold down a key and turn up the slop control, so we can go everywhere from nice sort of gentle sort of detune to something a little bit more horrible. Then the third parameter called mode, and this is what's changing the behavior of the shape control. So as I explained before, once I hold down a note and I move the shape control, it doesn't have any effect. It only has an effect when I play the next note. And that's great for live use. But if you want to change the chords using MIDI from your DAW or sequencer or whatever, then it's best to actually have this being an immediate effect, and that's what mode number 2 does. So with mode number 2, I'll hold down a note and change the shape control. So you get real-time changes with mode number 2. Right, so here I am in Cubase in my DAW, and I've got a MIDI track set up here. At the moment it's not connected to any devices ins or outs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it up to my NTS-1 so that we receive MIDI data from it. And then what I'm going to do is just start recording, and I'm going to twiddle around with the shape control knob, and then twiddle around with the Alt, the sort of shift plus shape control. and you'll see there that we're recording some data in Cubase. Let's double click on that bit of MIDI data and see what we've recorded. So obviously I didn't play any notes, but there's some automation data there. And in Cubase I can drop down this little menu here, and I can see that we've recorded CC54 and CC55. There's 54 and there's 55. So the shape control is sending data on 54, and the alt, the shift plus shape, is sending it on 55. So with that information to hand, we can now automate chord selections with the NTS-1 from the DAW. Right, so what we're going to do now is just create a little track and automate some chords on the NTS-1. So I've got my MIDI track here still. I'm going to set the output of it to be the NTS-1 so we can control the synth. The input is not going to be mapped because I'm actually going to draw the MIDI notes in myself manually. So let's just do that now with the draw tool. Just drawing a couple of bars, and in the editor down here I'll draw in the notes. So I'm going to draw in an E flat, and then a C, then an A flat, and then a B flat. Okay, so those are my 4 notes. Let's just set a looping region here, and let's just play it without doing anything to the synth itself. So I can hear there that it's actually playing major chords, so that must be what our shape control is currently set to. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the mode is mode number 2, which allows us to have real-time control over the shape. So I'll go to my mode parameter and make sure it's set to 2. Then what I'm going to do is draw in some automation so that we are setting the shape. So let's do that now. It's CC54. So there we go, 54. So the range of the MIDI data here is maximum of 127 down to 0. So 64 is around the middle, the 12 o'clock position of the control. So as long as we are drawing above or below that 64 line somewhere, we can set the major and the minor chords. So I'm going to have a major, I know it's playing major right now, but I'm going to make sure that it's set. So I'm going to play a major chord, so that's sort of like a value below 64. Let's just go around here somewhere and drop a line in. That'll give me my major chord for the E flat. Now the C chord, I want it to be a C minor. So I'm going to draw above the 64 line, value line, like that. That'll give me my minor. And then I'm going to drop down to an A flat major and a B flat major. So let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, so that sounded okay, but let's change that last chord to be, rather than a B flat major, let's make it a B flat 7 or a dominant 7 instead. Now that requires that I change the chord set, so not only be changing and automating the shape, but also the alt as well, or the shift shape. So let's switch over to automating the alt. I'm going to have to go into setup and add it in 50. So that we can edit it. let's go to 55. Okay, so we're going to want zero for all three chords apart from the last one, where we actually want its number 3. So anywhere up here. Okay, so chord set number 3, and we'll shift back to the shape control, and I want it to be down here. That will give me the right chord. Let's try that now. Right, so with that principle in mind of how you can set and automate the chords using MIDI, this is a project in Cubase that I put up with just a little demonstration song in it, just to sort of like show you the kind of things you can do. It's really quite a simple song, I have to say. Now, as you'll see here, it's all audio tracks. There's no MIDI tracks in here, and that's because the NTS-1 doesn't allow you to store presets. It's like using an old school analog synthesizer. You set up a preset and a sound that you like, and then record the audio before you then move on to recording something else. So these are all the little audio segments, and like I've shown you in some of my other videos, they're in pairs. I've color coded them so you can see, but I've just recorded a little snippet of audio, and then I'm repeating it over and over and over throughout the track, as you can see here, orange and yellow, and again down here with the green. So let me just solo some of these sounds so you can hear what I've recorded. There you go. So that's those same 4 chords that you heard earlier. What about this green one down here? Same 4 chords, but just a different patch. And then after those, I've got, let's just have a look at this green one here. It's just a little bits of solo stuff going on. Little monophonic patch there. This one down here. Nice sound. And this blue one, let's just try that one. A little arpeggio. That's it. Those are all the sounds that I've got. The yellow ones here are just the same as the orange. What I found was that if I recorded it twice, I got some nice sort of subtle sort of differences in the modulation of the patches. So these two are the same but recorded twice, and I get this kind of sort of effect. As opposed to what it would sound like just on its own. So that's all of the sounds that I recorded. The red track you can see up here, this is just a little bit of a drum track. So I'm just going to play it to you now. This is the NTS-1 with the Chord user oscillator. Just a couple of different chords and a little bit of arpeggio and a little lead going on. A little simple song. So I hope you enjoy it. Here it comes now.